So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's Development and Management Committee. Before we do start the official meeting, we'll just quickly introduce everyone on the front table to yourselves. My name is Councillor Mohammed Adnan, and I'll be chairing tonight's meeting.
I'm Emma Barker, I'm the legal advisor to the committee.
Hi, I'm Neil Watson. I'm Pendle's Assistant Director for Planning, Building Control and Regulatory Services.
I'm Helen, one of the property lawyers at Pendle Council, and I'm here to
Sarah Smith, Vice Council of Walsall and Folwich.
Richard O'Connor, Council for Burybridge.
John Tennant, Councillor for Marston and Southfield.
Councillor Sajjad Ahmed, Director Eastern Coventry.
Good evening, Martin Stone, Councillor for Barrowford and Pendleside.
Councillor David Wakehammer, Councillor for Eby and Courtswood. I also chair the board here at the Raynor Centre, and I should advise you that in the event of a fire, we go out of this exit here, turn left or right, and we assemble in the car park behind the library. There may be an alarm that is set for the other end of the building, which is the business end of the building, and it makes a sound. If it's a different sound and it's a fire, I will say that isn't the burglar alarm being set, and you need to exit. But if I sit here patiently and quietly, then I can assure you that it's just the alarm being set at the end of the building.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Councillor Yasser Iqbal, Brightfield and Renewal.
Good evening, my name is Councillor Faraz Ahmed for Waldron and Whitefield.
Good evening, I'm Joanne Eccles, a Committee Administrator at Pendle Council.
Yeah, Councillor.
Mr Chairman, Councillor Andy Bell, who did the site visits this afternoon, is clearly not here, and I would like to nominate a substitute as group leader. Ask that Councillor David Hartley is appointed to the committee. Confirmation.
Yeah, that's fine, that is.
Sorry to drop on you, David.
Which is at the camera. Just in the camera.
So, Councillor David Hartley, Councillor for Eby and Courtswood.
Perfect, thank you very much. Just before we do start the meeting again, the only people that are allowed to speak this meeting whose names have already been put down, and just to save a little bit of time, please, if something has been said, if you can, please don't try repeating it, and there is a 5-minute time cap that you're allowed to speak up to, no more than 5 minutes. And please, when other speakers are speaking, please do respect them as you would want it when it's your turn. Does any member of the committee have any interest he or she wishes to declare? Thank you. Could you please approve the minutes of the meeting which was held on the 21st of October? Do we have a second? Thank you. Right, moving on to the planning applications. Right, we are going to move the smaller applications first and then leave the Barnoldswick one to the end. So the first application that we will be going to is 25/0458 FUL, part retention of function room, use class F2B at first floor conversion of ground floor from a pub to number 1 flat and a restaurant alteration to frontage, insertion of shutters and the installation of extraction flue to the site at 129 Manchester Road, Nelson. We do have 2 speakers on this. Could I please first ask Waj, please?
Thank you, Chair. As a resident, I want to make a formal objection in terms of this application. I'll several reasons as to why. This location is not suitable for such a business as it is on a corner of a very busy junction. There have been many road traffic collisions on here and nearby which has resulted in fatal and serious injuries. Just for information, there was an accident today on that junction between several vehicles which resulted in 3 people being taken to hospital, and that happened approximately, I think it was about 3 o'clock this afternoon. As a resident, and there's quite a few residents here, some are on their way, we have a right to a peaceful life, and by having this establishment within proximity, it will be detrimental effect on our lives and our children's lives. Such foods are also harmful to the public's health, and in the period where the government are trying to encourage healthy lifestyles, Pendle Council is handing out planning permissions and licences to unhealthy establishments. And obviously, I'll just reiterate, the application goes against the character of the area. We do have a lot of takeaways on Manchester Road, just past St Mary's Church, and I've done a count, and there's 62 food premises within half a mile radius of this location, which is a lot of food establishments. It's close, very close to a local primary school, and obviously we should be encouraging healthy eating, not unhealthy. The highway safety obviously I've covered with the number of accidents, and in terms of the junction we've covered as well, and with 75 customers they're anticipating, so if you had say 5 members of the public, I mean staff members, that would take you up to 80, and if you average say 5 people per car, you're talking 16 vehicles, which could be parking on that double yellows. I know in the applications that they've said that they'll be using the nearest public car park, which is Rigby Street, which is some distance away, and on a night like this I don't see anyone walking that distance, because we've seen it on Manchester Road with the other takeaways. No one uses Rigby Street car park, they all park on Manchester Road, and many of you will have driven along Manchester Road and seen the effect it has, and this application is further up on a busy junction next to the traffic lights, and we think it should be refused based on that. And I know Azar will also cover this stuff, but I know they're saying it's a restaurant, but it's just another takeaway with a lot more customers.
Thank you very much. County Councillor Azali, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Wajid's highlighted some of the issues, and some of the councillors at Nelson Area Committee are here today, and it was rejected overwhelmingly. I think there was one vote in support. But Wajid talked about a serious accident today. The junction of Longshire Road and Manchester Road is notorious for car accidents. The Star Cycling Club was a member-only club. You know, people were dropped off like taxis on the corner, or people walk there. This has been turned into a function room. You don't have a problem with a function room, but into the restaurant. And at the planning meeting, the planning officer, it wasn't Neil, I can't remember the name of the gentleman, said that, you know, they could have 25% of the business as takeaway. Anyone who knows that junction knows how dangerous it is. I was surprised that Lancashire County Council had no objections to the application, so I contacted a senior officer at Lancashire County Council who said that who then had the conversation, he said, with the planning officer, and was told, that actually 25% of the business could be takeaway, and that he said that they were promised that Lancashire County Council would be reconsulted. This afternoon I checked again with the same officer. He said nothing had happened, and then he got back to me and sent me a note saying basically that junction is a notorious junction, and if there was a takeaway element of that restaurant, it would cause serious problems and be dangerous for traffic and for pedestrians. The other issue is within 50 yards of there is a primary school, St John Southworth. The County Council's health and wellbeing strategy points out sort of the increase in obesity and takeaways near or around schools, and this would go against that. The parking shown for this so-called restaurant is in Rigby Street. So any of you know Nelson, that's a little car park. No one's going to walk 150, 200 yards from the little car park to the so-called restaurant. And it's just a way of trying to tick a box on the planning scheme. I'm sure the planning officers will say, well, hang on, this will be, appeal, this will cause us costs. But less than 50 yards from the corner here, you've got what was the fireplace warehouse opposite St Mary's Church. When an application went in for a takeaway, officers said that if it was rejected, it would incur costs on appeal. It went to appeal and the inspector threw it out and said that there, it shouldn't be a takeaway. There are so many. There have been so many collisions and fatalities on that road around that junction that it's just bonkers that someone would put in an application for a restaurant, knowing full well then they operate other such premises that they are basically takeaways, and it's trying to bypass the planning system. So I would urge councillors to support the Nelson Area Committee and reject this application. And just finally, before I go, the residents of Hope Street, which backs on to the Working Men's Club, they have no parking on the front because the gradient of the street is such, it's cobbled, there's no way you can get down to there. They all park their cars on the back street, so this is also against residential amenity. Residential meter will be affected. Where is the council going to suggest that the residents go and park their cars for 30 odd houses if you also got people dumping their cars at the back to jump in to get something from this establishment? So I'd ask you to reject it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors? Councillor Whitley?
Can I ask a question of Mr Watson, please?
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not on the Nelson and Brinefield Area Committee, so I'm not privy to the discussion there. But in terms of reasonable grounds for rejection, in Mr Watson's view as planning manager, what would be reasonable grounds?
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, just first of all, the application is for a restaurant. Okay. Comments have been made regarding the element of takeaway. If you wanted to prevent any takeaway happening from there, you simply put a condition on. So the application is for a restaurant, and if you I have concerns if it was a takeaway, because I agree here. I saw the accident today, by the way. It wasn't caused by the junction, it was caused by the roadworks and the temporary traffic lights. So we saw that as it happened on the site visit. So, Chairman, I agree. If it's a takeaway, wrong place to have a takeaway, completely wrong place. But if it's a restaurant and you put a condition on to say no off sales at all, which you can do, and that's reasonable here because of the highway safety concerns, then you look at the other reasons why, highway reasons. If it's a restaurant, people don't come and park instantly. They go because they're going to have a meal for half an hour, 2 hours, whatever it may be. So the operation of a restaurant is different than a takeaway. And that's what they've applied for. So if you want to condition that. So going back to Councillor Whip's question is, I haven't forgotten it, I don't think there are strong highway grounds if you condition it and to say no off sales.
Thank you, Chairman. I note the use of the word strong by Mr Watson. I think that that gives a little bit of a wedge in terms of whether there are highway grounds which could be applicable, and that perhaps might give the committee an opportunity to reject this, even though it may go to appeal. It may be 50-50 whether it's approved on appeal or not, and then the question of costs, if it was rejected, wouldn't necessarily come in. So I wonder, Chair, whether we, as a committee, we explore that issue. I mean, I hear what the two speakers have said, and respect the knowledge of the area and the way in which things are working in that particular neck of the woods. So I'm open to persuasion either way. One final thing, Chair, if I may, and apologies to Councillor Andy Bell for substituting on the committee, but I was concerned you weren't going to get here and then we wouldn't have our wrong building. Okay. But I would just make a point to Councillor Andy Bell that he may speak as a councillor. So if he's got anything to say, he did all the site visits this afternoon, he has the opportunity to do so. Last thing, I note that Councillor Faraz Ahmed was in the papers saying what a good thing it would be to have Curry Mile in Nelson, and I've said something very similar in the past. So I think there's a bit of tension between the aspiration to have Curry Mile and whether or not to have this approved or not.
Not at that corner.
Thank you. Councillor Comer-Pratt, please.
So, I've got more questions for Mr Watson. So generally, when we've got things in a town centre, whether it's a building or a business, we're not bothered about the parking because we say it's in a town centre. But this isn't in the town centre, or is it? Or is it? It's not.
No, it's not in the defined town centre, no.
It's not in, so normally, just talk me through this, normally we would, if it was outside the town centre, be expecting some parking spots.
Through you, Chairman, it's if this was a new application, new building for this and a new use, I'd be recommending refusal to this. It has, though, a lawful use. The first floor is a function room, can be used today, tomorrow as a function room without any restraints on there because there's no planning conditions on there. The ground floor can be used as a members club, so people can go in and out of there. It's not like a pub as such, unless you've got your membership card, and you can go in and out anytime you wish to as a member. So that is what its lawful use is. The view that I've recommended to committee is based on that lawful use. I don't see this altering what it can be lawfully used as now. They can go in and out anytime they wish to. They can use a function room anytime they wish to.
So it's equivalent to when Chorlton's Church Hall became a nursery. It's the same sort of use, but not exactly the same use. But in the class terms, it is the same use.
Yeah, and Councillor Whip talked about appeals. We would be led through an appeal based on, right, so what is the difference and what makes it worse were you to choose to decide that the merits of this were to turn it down. And I'm saying I'd really see the lawful use. In fact, there's probably some advantages of a restaurant because you're not going to get the throughput.
I think there's a world of difference between a restaurant and a takeaway, as you rightly say, where people are sort of nipping in, getting their order, leaving. The closest car park is Ridley Street, which is 4 minutes away, which is, as you say, reasonable if you're going out for dinner. You would sort of expect to walk if you're going out for dinner. I read all the sort of pro forma objections. There were sort of two versions of objections that were on the portal, and the question of bins came up. Has that been sort of accounted for?
Yeah, there's no additional. It functions without bins at the moment, so asking for bin storage I didn't think was necessary to make the application acceptable.
So it's the same really. If it was a new application, you wouldn't be for it. But because it is as it is, and the distinction between what it was is and what it could be is slight,
yeah,
that's why you're suggesting that we approve it.
Yes.
So really, I'm a bit like Councillor Wimp in that I see a heritage building in a conservation area that hasn't been properly used and has been boarded up for years and years, could now have a viable use, could have an economic use, could be improving the building, improving the area. That's all positive. And on the negative side, we've got the fact that actually, if it didn't exist, it's not in the perfect location because of traffic and parking and so on. I think whatever we do, if we are minded to approve it, it is clear that we absolutely should have the condition to say that there must be no takeaways. Takeaways are not on the table, so to speak, or you must eat on the table, you mustn't take it away. So I'll be interested to hear what other people have to say, but I see it as a difficult one. There are positives and there are negatives.
Thank you. Councillor Yasser, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, can I ask a question of Mr Watson, please? One or two questions. Firstly, in relation to one of the points Councillor County Councillor Azali made about the highways. So there was some discussion at the Bryfield and Nelson Area Committee last time about highways, and I think he said he was going to speak to officers. Have we, because we thought there was going to be some response from highways, or we were going to approach highways, has there been anything from our side? Because obviously what Councillor Azar was saying that we've not had anything, or they haven't received anything from us?
I'm not aware they've received anything from us. I must admit, when I got the list of actions from committee, it wasn't one of those. But so we haven't consulted, but we haven't had a response.
Okay.
We haven't reconsulted. Reconsulted, yes.
Now, if we had reconsulted and highways came back and said, oh, CC had said something different to what they said, would that change your view on? Because obviously they are just the advisory on the just advisors. What would your position be if they come back and said, actually, we do have some concerns now?
I'd ask them why they've changed their mind when the application's the same, because there's no new information on that, is there? It is just a reconsultation, and we've got the formal response. I don't think there's been any material change in circumstances, so the application hasn't changed except for the external design has altered to keep the existing frontages. So if we got an alternative view on that, I'd be probably querying why we've got that, what's materially different.
Okay, so I think one of the points which was raised last time about this potential about there being an element of takeaway use. I think there's Councillor Azali or someone in the report, there's a reference to a 25%. Is that right that they can use? There's a 25% element of takeaway use which is allowed unless it's conditioned.
It's not. There's nothing in law that says 25%. What effectively restaurants can do is have some off-site sales as part and parcel of their normal operating modus operandi, without that then being a takeaway. But just to reiterate what I've said, I would have a condition on there to say no off-site sales, because I entirely agree off-site sales will cause problems and will be dangerous, because it will have a propensity for taxis to drop off and people just nipping in to pick the takeaway and just eat and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you. And one other thing, one of the points you made was that had this been a new application, then you'd be minded to probably recommend refusal, but because this has been used before. Now, we discussed this at the last area committee. Some of the councillors have been around longer than I have at that committee. Mentioned about the last proper use of it was about 20 years ago, maybe longer. In that time, there has been other use, perhaps storage use. I think Councillor Faraz was mentioning something about storage use. Has that not changed because it was a pub, then it potentially something else or nothing, and then it's now?
I've worked at Pendle for 20 years. I think it's been empty for half of that. So I've not seen another use happening in that building. So my personal knowledge of driving past it every day on the way into work is that there's been no other use of it since. You may have had a old box in there, but it's not been used as a warehouse or a storage facility.
And very finally, in terms of, before I make some comments, in terms of highways grounds, what would have been used for 15 or 20 years ago obviously would be different in the way that the highway is now. And we've seen how busy, as I think the report actually mentions, how people illegally park, and we've seen that. Can that not be something we can consider, that when it had its lawful use 15 or 20 years ago, the circumstances were different in terms of parking, the congestion, the number of takeaways that there are further down the road? Is that not something that we can take into account?
You could do it in one sense, but the point is whether anyone could lawfully start up the lawful use again, which they could tomorrow. And, you know, I know some members' clubs, for example, Cherry Tree Cricket Club, one of the busiest places in Blackburn of a weekend, and that's a members' club, which this was, and there's a difference between a pub and a members' club, as you used to have. So it could start again tomorrow perfectly lawfully by having members drinking, doing whatever they do, and having functions upstairs.
Okay. Sorry, I did say very finally, but this is my final question. In terms of the noise and residential amenity concerns, there was a mention in the report about potential, looking at page 5 of the section where it says residential amenity. It says, provided the extraction unit operates effectively and is maintained, there would not likely be noise or smell issues emanating from it. A condition requiring full details of how it operates would be required. Is that not something that we can look into in terms of the noise impact this causes, not only to the nearby residents and the amenity, but also between the function room and the proposed flat?
Well, Chairman, as just mentioned, they can operate the function room now. We could all go and have sandwiches, etc. in there now. That's its lawful use. So we can't go back on our lawful use and retrofit that. But obviously what we're wanting to do is an extraction system to cook food there. They can be noisy if they are not maintained. It's the fans in there and the bearings, and when they vibrate and not maintained, then they can cause noise. Otherwise, they're not noise generating pieces of apparatus.
Shall I allow other people to speak and then I can come back?
Councillor Andy Bell.
Yes, thank you. I'm looked on page 5 of the highway safety, and there's nothing in here that actually demonstrates any deliveries. So that won't be a car, that will be a large van or a wagon. For example, I can say that going through Market Street in Colne, where you've got Dixie Chicken, where you've got pass marking on the road which say no loading at any time, you will generally find a HGV parked up unloaded. I can foresee a possibility of the same situation here, but they're not going to can't park on Ruby Street. They will park on the junction or just past the junction where it's going to cause a hazard. But even if you've got double yellows, like I sort of mentioned, the parking in Nelson is nice anyway, where I've been there myself, you've got people parked on double yellows, they park on the footpath. I can't see that just for this one location they're going to say, oh no, nobody's going to park here, we're going to park in the corner. I can see it being a major hazard, because it's the right way, it's not going to walk 200 yards with 5 carriages of food stock or anything else. And that is something that's not been mentioned anywhere within here apart from potential customers. So I might like to get out into the role of brought into it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor.
Thank you. I'm a little bit late for this, I do apologise, but I do know the area. I lived on Manchester Road in the early 90s. My daughter was born on Manchester Road. I was a member of the Nelson Star Cycling Club, so we quite often go down there on the weekend and enjoy it.
He did declare an interest.
Yeah, but enjoy a cheap beer. and cut price to be as all the members were. And I can remember the 90s far better than I can remember what I was doing this morning. But on the adjacent corner, just to play devil's advocate here, there was a very good fish and chip shop, which then became Chinese takeaway. The people there then used to come and park on the hotel grounds on the same site, which is now not a hotel at all. And they'd also then use the car park, the petrol station opposite to park in and bob across from the traffic lights there. Well, that's obviously we walked everywhere then. I went on bikes. But I was around there recently, in fact only this week. Yeah, the traffic around there is horrendous, and if they are going to do a takeaway there, I think we are looking for trouble there. Because I don't think the takeaway fish and chip shop is not there anymore, is it not? No. So, but yeah, okay. And like I'd like to say what Councillor Andy Bell said about the loading and unloading. They will load at the best, easiest place to get things in and out.
Councillor Martin Stone, please.
Thank you, Chair. So some really good points have been made around highways and traffic, and Councillor Bell's pointed out loading and unloading is a very well-known point. I wanted to explore on page 6, if I could, under highway safety. We seem to make an assumption here that if we change the use to a restaurant, we will have lawful parking. It says literally, sales customers would likely park any vehicle they would use in a lawful parking area, not directly at the junction. Now, I'm not entirely clear that I understand why we are saying that when you have said earlier that if this was a new application, you would be minded to refuse it because of the lack of parking. Why are we making this assumption that we'll have all this lawful parking? I'm not convinced that this change of use will not actually lead to more unlawful parking because fundamentally that building was not going to be used for a very long time, and it seems unlikely to me that restaurant users would park 5 minutes away and happily walk. And I think that I really am confused as to your trying to square your comments about, well, if it came now as a restaurant, it would not be approved. But, we should approve it tonight, even though it's a change of use. So,
Joe, two things. Why I said it wouldn't be approved now is because there isn't parking available with it, and even with the existing use, there'd be drays and deliveries, etc., and it's not the right place to have those. Hence that. But we have a lawful use there, so we can't escape from that. So my comments around, and it's only an opinion I'm expressing to yourselves on this issue. If I go to a restaurant to eat, I would be less likely, and I think most people are less likely to park illegally for an hour and a half than if I'm nipping in for a takeaway, or if I'm being dropped off at a public house in a taxi or something. I'd be less likely to park for a long time if I'm going for a meal. That's the logic behind that. But fundamentally, we have a lawful use there. If that was re-implemented, which they can do perfectly lawfully tonight, tomorrow, that's the fallback position that this committee's got to decide what weight to give to.
Is that it for now, Councillor Martin? Thank you. Councillor Farrell, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, especially within Nelson, speaking to a colleague of mine within the council, and we did highlight how brilliant Nelson would look if there was a Curry Mile. Yes, yeah, agreeing with the Curry Mile is just only because due to the current restaurants and takeaways that were already there and how we could work around them and promote culture more than anything else. And the article in the paper was mainly regards to that, but I did highlight a lot of things within that as well. Was enforcement was a major issue. We needed to create more enforcement within the area because of people parking on double yellow lines, which is a parking issue again, double parking, and people popping into takeaways just to quickly nip in and nip out, double parking, even at times having 3 cars parking on each side just to nip into a takeaway. So I think the journalist did take the article in a very different way, David, but it would be good to see something like that highlighted, but promoting more culture and more, how can I say, diversity within Nelson. But just want to ask a quick question before I move on further, Neil, does this fall into the curtilage of the town centre? No. Okay. Because I know previously I've argued points with regards to a couple of shops that were on, one was on Regent Street, I know there's a highway issue with regards to that as well, on Leeds Road and other locations as well, and across from the Start Cycling Club, where the fish and chip shop used to be, 3 shops to the left hand side, a dessert shop was recently applied for as well, which also got refused due to being not part of the within the curtilage of the town. So why has this received precedence in terms of being as part of the curtilage of the town? And a sequential test hasn't been mentioned, which is quite surprising, but we've not been able to approve other applications, but we want to approve this particular application. And a valid point that Councillor Andrew Bell raised in terms of the deliveries, and you know, sometimes delivery vehicles, when they do come, they're there for literally half an hour, and where do they park? We're on a junction here, so where do they actually park? And picking up big bags of potatoes and trolleys, etc., it would be a major issue, especially when you're on a very busy crossroad within the town. And I think one of the things that many councillors haven't raised again, I think Councillor Yasser raised it again, and highways has been mentioned, but even though there are roadworks going on there at the moment, I use that road regularly, and the amount of accidents that we try to avoid, they do take place. And recently, 2 years ago, there was an accident to the left-hand side of the Start Cycling Club. A year ago, there was an accident to the left-hand side and the right-hand side. Sorry, and then there was an accident today, maybe due to the roadworks. But bear in mind, we have always reported. I know County Councillor Azhar Ali is there. County Councillor Iqbal has also raised issues with regards to this stretch. Even though I do call it the Curry Mile stretch, it's also the hazardous highway stretch from Colne all the way through to Burnley. Because of Burnley Road entering into Colne Road, it's just like a racetrack, which we're also trying to prevent. And when you've got a so-called restaurant there, does it really fit for purpose in terms of having these kind of issues around us? And the actual owners of this restaurant, I'm very familiar with. Before I come to these owners, the previous owners used the place for a storage place for their markets in Liverpool, who I knew very, very well. And I've popped into the building several times, knowing that there's loads of textiles clothing there. They was doing a lot of knitwear clothing, so it has been used over the last 10, 15 years for that particular purpose. So he was basically collecting his goods on an early Sunday morning, early Saturday morning, and taking them over to Liverpool for where his markets used to be. So then again, there was issues with parking, because he used to park on the side of the building and take his materials. So this particular owner here, Mr. Taj, is going to be opening a K2 Taj Chippery. That's what the name is. It's based in Blackburn, just off Whalley Range, and there is a little restaurant in there, but there's also a fast food takeaway. That's the whole purpose of it all. So they will be serving food to take out. It won't be a restaurant. There will be an option for you to eat in, like all the other takeaways in Nelson. They give you the option to eat in. So if, for example, a takeaway was to be established within the curtilage of the town centre, they could call it a restaurant, but it could be used as a takeaway. So it's coming back to that same point. Also, when you have visitors coming to this so-called restaurant, Many don't use a car, many would walk as well, give them credit, but many would want to go and get dropped off on a taxi. And where do taxis park? They would want to park right outside the door. Consider if it's depending on the weather as well, they'd want to be parked right outside the door, which is right outside a main road again, and outside traffic lights. So it's defeating the object here now, and I'm really shocked and surprised that such an application is actually being considered to move forward with. And Andrew obviously hit the nail on the head when, I've not thought about that, but that was a valid point he's raised there. But I'm honestly, Neil, I don't want to be really harsh on this. I'm really surprised that the officer's recommendation was for approval for this application. I'm really surprised. Thank you.
So what was your original question to Neil as well? You had a question on the
question was in regards to the sequential test. That was the question with regards to the sequential test. So why wasn't there a sequential test on this particular application when there was further applications that were made previously that were rejected?
Two points. I'll come to the sequential test secondly. The Town and Country Planning use classes order 1987, it's been amended over years, stipulates uses in use classes and uses which are called sui generis, uses on their own. Takeaways are sui generis uses, so they need planning permission. Okay. The application before you, if you read the description, is not for a takeaway. This is not an application for a takeaway. Okay. If the applicant thinks that, then they're incorrect. And as I said, you can use conditions if you wanted to add that bit about ancillary sales, just to say no site sales. Sequential tests are for non-town centre uses outside of a town centre. For new uses, this use is a town centre use outside of a town centre that exists. So we wouldn't ask for sequential tests for an existing lawful use, only a new use. So the ones you're talking about, which I recall, for the ice cream, etc., were just new uses outside the town centre. This is an existing use wanting to alter the type of town centre use to a restaurant from a pub. So it wouldn't generate a sequential test.
But can I just ask one more question, sorry. If there was something like a public house or something like a function room or something like a restaurant as well, Neil, surely they wouldn't need parking spaces as well. I remember there was an application on top of Brunswick Street. There were some units that were going to be built there, but the units had to be built there subject to enough parking spaces. So, why is this restaurant being built not subject to any parking spaces, but looking at a parking space, which is a public parking space, which is 200 metres away?
During again through you, we have an existing use that will generate an amount of parking that it should have. It hasn't got that. You need to balance the new proposed use against the lawful use and make your determination as to whether you feel there is additional or a different type of traffic flow and the different amounts of parking associated with it. But you cannot get away from it's an existing use without car parking in a location where you wouldn't have granted planning permission, but it is there, it is lawful, it can operate and will have highway impacts. It's balancing the lawful impacts, if you will, against the new ones.
Councillor Witt, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a maxim which is, if in doubt, throw it out. And it's clear from the comments around the committee that it is a balanced position, and some people are persuaded that the benefit outweighs the downside. But I think there's a factor which isn't taken into account in the committee report, and it's what Councillor Farazan said when he commented about it's being used for storage. It's been used perhaps for manufacturing, am I correct? So it isn't an established use as a function room and members club. If it's been for a decade and more used for storage and manufacturing, that's what its use is. And I think that we have got an argument, I'm not saying it's guaranteed to win an appeal, but I think there is a very good argument that it has become storage and manufacturing. Now, Mr. Watson might say, well, because of the changes in use classes, you could change it into a restaurant. But I think it does give us a little bit of wriggle room. And I think in terms of, it isn't a function room and the members club, it has been used for storage, then I think we've got a better argument when it gets to appeal. So I would move that we do reject this application on the grounds of road safety in view of the inadequate space for delivering and customer parking, and Mr. Watson may want to tidy that up in terms of the language being used or advise on how we could strengthen it. But I would move that and see how we go.
Thank you. Councillor Yasser.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I want to second Councillor Whip's motion to refuse. If you hadn't done so, I would have been moving for refusal, but I'm happy to second what Councillor Whip has said, because highways is the main issue that we have in this particular location, and that was a unanimous, almost unanimous position that the Fryfield and Nelson Area Committee took. As a councillor, as Ali says, there was one person who voted against it, because I understand that some of the members who went to the site visit may have seen this accident, and it might have been due to the roadworks, but there have been many accidents which everyone around this table, not everyone, but most people will have heard of. There's one in particular, only 1 year ago, when a lady was killed when someone was doing more than 60 miles per hour on that stretch of road, quite literally 20 metres away from this the site, quite literally 20 metres. A year before that, again, it was shared across social media where a vehicle, again, quite literally on that crossroad, crashed into one of the traffic lights, very close to where the accident was today. So, and it's a regular scene, and people and I drive past it when I come to council meetings in Nelson, when I'm driving through Nelson. And it is literally used as a racetrack. All of that road stretch, all the way to my ward of Breedley. We've had issues on Combe Road, but it's very similar issues. What makes it worse, and what is an aggravating feature in this particular location, is that it's in a heavily built up area with takeaways, with people using that road to walk down from Lombardshire Road or Lombardshire Road. That's one thing. And secondly, parking will, in my view, make it even worse, or the lack of parking, because you have at this moment where people don't actually park at that stretch because it's double yellows, and it's not really a residential area. Most of the residents are here, they might parking behind Manchester Road. But anyone that thinks that people, even if it's a restaurant, will use Rigby Street, and it might be a 4 or 5 minute walk, but I can guarantee you that nobody is going to walk from Rigby Street all the way to this restaurant. There's takeaways quite literally opposite Rigby Street, a short walk, but maybe a 1 minute walk, and people still park on Manchester Road. So parking is, or the lack of parking, in my view, is a serious issue. The question really is, and it's a balanced decision, as Councillor Wimper said, and I think Neil alluded to it as well. On balance, when one considers the risk, the lack of parking, the high-risk concerns that people have raised, I'm, as I say, seconding Councillor Whip's motion to refuse, and I hope all members follow suit. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Coleman, perhaps, please.
I was going to suggest the opposite. And the reason I was going to suggest the opposite is Cone Area Committee has had almost an identical situation with a building on a corner that we all thought was really dangerous, which is this nursery in Taunton, had been a church hall that had established use case. So before I do suggest the opposite, I just want to ask Mr. Watson whether, if it could be proved that there had been this storage and manufacturing, would that negate the established use case that had been built up over decades before?
it gets, through you, Chairman, it gets more complicated. So, a B1 use is the old version of B1, which is the light manufacturing, a bit of storage, is in use class E, which is being applied for here. If you were, as a council said, then there has been another use on board, say it's a manufacturing facility, a B2, whatever. The character of that use would be, the lawful use would be set against what's being proposed. So a manufacturing use in that facility with its deliveries and pickups and all that, that would have to be set against what the proposed use is. My view is that it hasn't been lawfully established. It can revert to this use perfectly lawfully. And my advice would be to deal with this based on it having a lawful use with no evidence before us that there's another lawful use.
So understanding everything you say about the safety and understanding about that junction and having seen the accident today, I understand that there is an established use. And that's what we, even though we're reluctant, that's what we have to be guided by. But I've heard all the talk of the takeaway. We can condition against the takeaway, so we should, because that definitely will exacerbate irresponsible picking up, dropping off, etc. So I propose that we approve this application with the very stern condition that there can never be a takeaway there.
Thank you, Councillor Sutcliffe.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll start by seconding that. And this is a location that I know well. And there were comments about, I think it was Councillor Ahmed that said about it being a racetrack and that area being a racetrack. Now, we know that. We know that, and we know that people are trying to do things about it. Lancashire County Council works with National Highways to secure funding for average speed cameras between Burnley and Brightfield. Now, in my opinion, it should have gone further, it should have gone to Nelson, so that we could control some of that speed because of the serious nature of the accidents that have happened, particularly around that junction. But when you dovetail them again to the Accessible Nelson projects that have been funded through the Liven Up Fund and around some of the safety things that have been done there to control the speeds of vehicles, I think you've actually got quite a good speed mitigation corridor going on. Now, I hope that it works, sincerely hope that it works, because we do not want any more loss of life along there. So that raised a lot of red flags for me when I first received my papers and kind of went through and looked at the location and thought, gosh, what a busy place to have a restaurant. What, you know, and I've worked in lots of restaurants actually. I've worked in restaurants and worked in pubs and worked in takeaways, so I understand the nature of those businesses. And I understand the nature of those businesses not just in terms of a barman or waiting staff. I understand the nature of that business. And there's a lot of viability involved with the takeaway part of that business. It makes quite a substantial part of the takings quite often for a business like that. So if this were to be approved and the takeaway part was conditioned that you can't have a takeaway, then I would question whether it's actually viable. So in terms of residents' concern, it may be that this business can't even happen. Quite often we make decisions around planning where we actually approve things that simply can't happen, or that the person receiving the permission don't want to go ahead with that permission because it's just not viable to do so. Now, if you condition away the takeaway, they may look again at the books and say, do you know what, we're not going to bother. Not having a takeaway just will not work here. It may be that the restaurant just doesn't have the viability to go ahead. What else we've got to understand the thing about deliveries. I think that's quite important. That's one thing that's not actually mentioned. I think Professor Bell, you're right to raise that. I mean, that's a really important point. And that does sort of raise a bit of a red flag. But the fundamental thing is that this could be used as a members club. I have visited members clubs, I've visited restaurants, and they are of a very similar nature in terms of their use. There are people sat around having a drink or having a meal. Now, I might be a real weirdo, but I love to walk. I walk everywhere. I regularly walk, not 400 yards from Rigby Street to the Star Cycling Club, but I'll regularly walk from Colne to Birmingham to go for dinner with my grandparents. And part of the reason that I do that is because then I can have a gin and tonic when I get there, or I'll go in a taxi so I can have a gin and tonic when I get there. Now, that's my lifestyle, that's what I choose to do, and I love to walk. Now, 400 yards or 400 metres, it wouldn't put me off whatsoever to go to a restaurant, but it would make a difference as a takeaway. But we are looking at this as a restaurant, therefore I must second what my colleague Sarah said about approving this application and support.
Councillor Yasser.
Thank you, Chair. Just one thing, sorry, I should have said this before. I made it during my questions. In terms of the residential amenity, I know we've on highway ground. I just wonder if I could seek Mr. Watson's advice in relation to residential amenity. There was a reference to the bin storage, where obviously there's a clear need for bins where there's a restaurant or a takeaway. Where would they store the bins? Would that be part of a reason for refusal?
Again, we go back to if it was a new application, then yes, but it's not. We're replacing a restaurant from a lawfully operating function room and pub. So there isn't provision for bin storage per se.
But that's fine. But in the real world, where would they store the bins?
Well, I'd only asked for information when it was pertinent to a change in the character of the use, and I don't think that is. So I've not. You can ask for that by all means if it's pertinent to you, but the bin storage requirement doesn't alter from one use to the other.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that might be. I'm just asking the question because I think that is clearly a relevant factor because whatever it's going to be, the bin storage is going to be a key issue. But I think on high-risk ground is the one aspect which we've refused on. Me personally, I think that the residential the bin storage aspect would be another one. But if he's saying that that is one, that might be something from the implication it seems that that's not the ground which we can grounds for refusal.
They haven't got it on. I've got the. Sorry, I wasn't able to share the plans, but there is ground floor space at the rear for bins to go in at the rear, but it's not shown on the plans as such.
Sorry,
there are two rooms at the back. If you wanted, again, you could condition that if you wish to, because there are two spaces where bins could be stored internally. Otherwise, it's out on the back.
Sorry, Bill, just to come back to that bin question again. I'm sure there's going to be a struggle to have 2 commercial bins or 3 commercial bins within that small area of that backyard of that building. And if there was a location for the bins, it'd probably be in the back street.
Yeah.
That's where it would be.
Sure. Go back to what changes from the lawful use. I hear these, but we will get examined at any appeal on this. What account have you taken for its lawful use? So if nothing changes from its lawful use, how do you defend that appeal? Because that's a cost scenario. So if nothing alters and nothing changes from that, it doesn't make it worse, you're straight away into costs.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm grateful for Mr. Watson. I mean, obviously that's within the rules, and planning those rules sometimes baffle me, but this is one of them, I think. But we are where we are. But I think I'm going to stick to the second Councillor Whip's motion on high-risk ground.
So I'm just going to bring Erin in, sorry.
Yeah, I think just before anyone votes on this, it's just to say that they're all valid points about the bins, the parking, the highway safety, but they'd be relevant to any new application. And obviously appeals going to take into account the lawful use of the existing building. They could literally open as a members club or a function room tomorrow and have people parking up and coming and going. It won't matter where the bins were or anything. So obviously you've had your officer advice, and that is to approve the application, obviously subject to this takeaway condition that's been discussed.
I think, if I may just say, if we could as well say that these back rooms will be used for bins as a further condition.
Yeah, obviously that can be conditioned as well. But as far as I can see, there are not any planning grounds for refusal based on the lawful use of the building at the minute, so you will be at risk of costs if it went to review.
Yeah, Councillor Andy and the bottom.
Yeah, just one question really, Laura. It's for information. Its previous use was as a pair of members club, they're not chancing to change use. When did it close down? How long has it been not being used?
16 years ago, sorry. Yes, 16 years ago.
So 16 years, a lot of things have changed. Even though it's not been used as that.
20.
I think that's something to take into consideration as well, maybe. Sure.
Councillor Martin-Stone, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was going to just explore exactly that question, because we're asked to vote on the basis of its lawful use, only it hasn't been in use for 16 years. So my question perhaps is, if through you, Chair, perhaps to Emma. I know Sarah asked this question a little bit earlier, but I need to understand this. Surely a lawful use of a building which is not used for that purpose for a prolonged period of time, surely that changes the legal use of that, or at least the de facto practical use, given that there are environmental changes around the area. Things fundamentally change. So surely that effective break in the lawful use for a prolonged period of time is a relevant consideration at appeal.
The lawful use, regardless of how long it's not been used for, is the lawful use, unfortunately. They could just open it again tomorrow as a members club and as a country with. It's, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but that's the situation.
Yeah, it is. There's a concept in planning law called abandonment. And abandonment is whether you can prove, we'd have to prove that the lawful use was intentionally abandoned. Quite often that relates to isolated farmhouses when they're falling down and people say, I've always intended to use it. So in these cases, 50, 60 years when cases have been abandoned and short periods. But you have to have evidence of that, and it ceased being used for commercial reasons, not for any other purpose. So I don't think there's any intention to abandon it lawfully, and I think it will be really difficult to prove that there has been intentional abandonment here over that period of time.
Thank you, Chair. Can private members clubs serve food?
Yes.
Okay. That says it all here, doesn't it? If a private members club could open tomorrow in there lawfully and serve food, what is the difference between that and a restaurant?
And I would just add, I keep going on about Chorlton, and I apologise, but it's exactly the same case. The church had stopped using this building, the church hall, so it had been nothing for years. It had been nothing before it became the nursery. But that established use tracked on, and I think we lost at appeal, didn't we, Neil, on that? I think they went to appeal in the end.
If I'm honest, I can't
it's
remember.
It's a nursery today, despite us all being against it, and it's on a busy corner, a dangerous busy corner in Chorlton. That established use was held, and it's just the same. It's exactly the same.
No, I appreciate it, Councillor Ashley, what you said there. It's just that if that was the case, then why don't we just go ahead and do it that way then, and let us continue with the application and how we want to make our decisions here then. If the clients want to go ahead with doing how they want to do it as a private members club, I can't see it happening as a private members club. On paper, it may seem like that, but it's not going to happen that way, guys. It's actually a takeaway stroke restaurant, or you can eat in like any other restaurant. We've got to get this straight, and I think we're getting confused here now, where it's going to be a private members club and all this scenario. What we're doing is we're just going around in circles here. It's actually, going to be a takeaway stroke restaurant. Whether there's going to be a condition on it or not, we've got to be realistic about it.
Chairman, sorry, I hate to this. As a matter of fact and a matter of law, they're not applying for a takeaway.
I appreciate that.
Sorry, with due respect, though, you keep mentioning it's going to be a takeaway. It's not applied for. So it is not a takeaway, but by a matter of fact, because that's what it's not being applied for, and that requires planning permission. Go back to the valid point that was made. I think it was Ms. Ritwell there that 25%, that's a rule of thumb, but you can condition that out.
Councillor Suckley.
Thank you. I keep needing to ask this question. I've written it down. I've written it right at the beginning of this. Because this takeaway keeps being mentioned, and we've said straight away that it can be conditioned away. What enforcement or what do we do that controls that operation?
Chairman, it's actually more simple with a condition than anything else. So If you take that a restaurant can have some ancillary off sales, proving what's ancillary and not is really difficult because you basically have to stake the place out and say what percentage is moving in and out. That's really difficult. But if you put a condition on that says no off sales, anyone walking out with any food is straight away breach of condition. And there's no right of appeal against a breach of condition. It's prosecution through Mrs. Barkey here. So it's actually simpler through a condition than it would be in a normal restaurant where how do I know how much takeaway activity is with it?
Chair, can I suggest we move to the vote?
Yeah, we will. Right, we're going to go for the vote, which was moved by Councillor Witt and seconded by Councillor Yasser Iqbal.
Take the amendment first.
Sorry. So we'll be taking the vote on the amendment first, sorry, which was to approve the application, which was moved by Councillor.
But with the two conditions.
Or the before.
Based on the two conditions, yeah.
Things in the not.
That's fine. With the conditions, moved by Councillor Sarah Coburn Price and Councillor Ash Sutcliffe. All those for the approval? All those against the approval? So now we'll move to the vote, which was moved by Councillor Witt for refusal, seconded by Councillor Yasser Iqbal. All those for the refusal? All those for? That application has been refused.
Yeah. Chairman, just to explain myself, I think we were on very weak ground, and I think the ground got weaker as that debate went on.
Yeah, we'll do that one next. We'll now be moving on to the Barnolds reform. We're going to leave that, but obviously I can understand obviously people are waiting for that one, so I'll move that next. So next application is 25/0144/OUT, outline erection of 98 dwellings, including open space, associated infrastructure at site of Fernbank Mill, Fernbank Avenue, Barnoldswick. So we do have speakers on this, so I just want to remind 5 minutes maximum, please. Could we first have Barry Norcross, please? Thank you.
I've lived up Fernbank all my life. I've got 2 properties where we live. The water course from Wheathill runs into the culvert under the proposed development and consequently into the stream which runs through the gardens of 5 properties on Fernbank Avenue, those being mine, which is Sandwich, Millbrook, Brooklyn, Hillcroft and Felgarth. My concern is the top water of road drainage from the actual 98 houses in this development could potentially lead to flooding. During the heavy rain last week, the water level had risen over the top of the stream in my garden. With all these extra houses, how much worse is this going to get? The original culvert that runs through the development of the area is a stone and flagged drain which at the Fernbank side is 3 metres deep. There is a sinkhole appeared where the drain is. The only access to this culvert is by coming into my property and entering the culvert. To my knowledge, there has been no inspection taking place on this culvert, and they proposed to build on top of that. Also, there is not enough infrastructure to cope with the extra houses being built. Doctors can't get an appointment for weeks. Dentists, people struggle to find NHS dentists. Schools are already oversubscribed. Over the past few years, over 200 extra houses have been built in Barnoldswick. now another 98 are proposed here. How is the town going to cope with all the extra people? This afternoon I saw councillors on Fernbank site. They heard that D&H Concrete Works vibrating. Would they like to live in a £200,000 house next to this business, which has been there for 50 years? Are they going to complain when the business is running so to cause problems? I hope not. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Would we please next have Malcolm Stirrer? If you're comfortable sitting there, you can very be comfortable, honestly.
Okay. Well, better off here because the microphone will pick him up.
Yeah, the microphone is at the front, but however you're comfortable.
I think it's comfortable there.
Yes, good evening, thank you. Yes, I live in one of the houses that Mr Norcross just mentioned, Hillcroft, which is on the north side of Fernbank Avenue. That is the right-hand side as you go up. And of course it's towards the end of the road, so whenever I go out or come back, I have to drive the full length of Fernbank Avenue. I've read the letters which residents of the area have sent to the council, and I share most of the concerns expressed in those. But tonight, I'd just like to focus on the traffic actually on Fernbank Avenue. I've read the planning officer's report, and the comments of Lancashire County Council Highways on pages 3 and 9 make me wonder if the council has any idea of the impact which the proposed development will have on the volume of traffic passing along Fernbank Avenue. Two cars can pass each other, of course, even if they are passing where a car is already parked on one side of the road. But where two cars are parked opposite each other, it is simply impossible for two cars travelling in opposite directions to pass. The road is only wide enough for 3 vehicles, and if you have two parked, one on each side, you can only get one between them. I've rarely, if ever, seen Fernbank Avenue, well, in recent years, in the 50 years, but I've rarely, if ever in recent years, seen Fernbank Avenue without any vehicles parked in it. Usually there are some on each side of the road. And that's not surprising. There's approximately 84 houses in Oakfield Avenue, Rosewood Avenue and Melville Avenue. Those are the 3 avenues that are gable end onto Fernbank. They don't have a road in front of them and only a typical back street behind, so the residents of those houses have no on-site parking and no adjoining road in which to park, and for them, Fernbank Avenue is the nearest place to park. From late afternoon and at weekends, it's common for each side of the road to be lined with parked cars and a sprinkling of light vans. At those times, it is in effect a single track road, with the only passing places being the junction with Coniston Avenue and the very end of the road in front of Henhouse Farm and Old Croft Barn, which is just approaching the junction with Gisborne Road. It's quite normal to turn from Gisborne Road into Fernbank Avenue and be faced with a car coming in the opposite direction. And bear in mind, Fernbank Avenue is dead straight and quite long, so you can see right up it. The only thing you can do if you turn into Fernbank Avenue is wait until the oncoming car passes before proceeding. Now that's not too much of a problem when there are gaps in the line of parked cars, because you can pass further up. But it's a different kettle of fish when both sides are fully parked. Vehicles currently using Fernbank Avenue, apart from those being parked there, are going either to or from the concrete works beyond the mill site, and those include heavy lorries, and approximately the 59 houses in Fernbank Avenue, Great Croft Close, Coniston Avenue and Ambleside Avenue. How can 98 more residential properties not be expected to more than double the volume of traffic? At busy times, traffic going towards Gisborne Road and having to wait at the junction will back up Fernbank Avenue. Traffic coming the other way will sometimes back up into Gisborne Road, which will make turning into that road even more difficult than it is now. What if this is a situation when an ambulance, fire engine or other emergency vehicle needs to quickly pass along the road? Lancashire County Council don't seem to mention any of that, yet it's obvious to anyone who currently uses the road, and it should have been considered by LCC. Did the Lancashire County Council not notice the situation? The road cannot be widened, there's no alternative access, and I think the site is not a suitable one for 98 properties. Half that number should be the maximum for which permission is granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And do we have Steve Bourne? No, that's fine, thank you. Could we have Keith Potter, please?
Good evening all. Keith Potter, 3 Fernbank Avenue. Could I start off please over the documents that were on the website? Could I go back to a planning response from the lead local flood authority dated the 10th of November, where they say they still hold to maintain their objection. Has there been any change to that? Sorry, Mr. Watson.
There is an update report which I can refer to afterwards, but I don't want to eat into your 5 minutes, but there hasn't been a response to that.
We'll give the response at the end, and the councillors can bear that in mind as well.
Well, that was half of my argument. I couldn't understand it, why you were going ahead, and on the 10th, that they were sending back to you, something that they're still sticking to what they said,
If you don't mind, you're going to go into your 5 minutes if you want to respond.
No, sorry.
As it's part of your case, the applicants have asked for the application to go before committee today. We thought it was premature. The lead local flood came with comments and the applicant's response, and we asked the lead local flood for their further comments, which we haven't got. I hope that helps you, certainly.
That was the 10th of November. I also want to go back to the letter that came back on the 11th from the Muller Group and their associates, the agents and that, where virtually they were blackmailing you, telling you that if the application is turned down, they will appeal it immediately, and they will seek full costs at a public inquiry. And they even set out their preferred barrister, a Casey, Paul Tusher, or something, and a full team of consultants. I don't know who he is, whether he's like Perry Mason, Rumble, or anyone like that. He could even be a Michael Mansfield. But to me, to be threatening a cash-strapped council with a thing like that to start off with, to me, it doesn't seem right. It's as if they are threatening you. Right, can I just also, as like Malcolm did, some of the things that I was going to say, and could I also mention why the report on the flora fauna ecological report from Brindle and Green only hit the documents on the 17th. 81 pages to look through, and it's the same business like that my son's in, but he works for a global company like ERM. And so obviously I haven't had the chance to ask him what he thinks about it. And yeah, it was just like amazing to that. And the final point is why is it today that Alex Cameron has put an email on the documents to Yorkshire Water asking for comments, and they've got 21 days to answer by the 9th of December, and with the comment that the decisions on this that they usually take about 6 to 8 weeks, but as this is for a major application, it will take 11 to 13 weeks, which will take us 3 months hence, like. So how do you get around that when you're making like a decision tonight? And there's an email gone out today, as I said, to Yorkshire Water, and they've got 21 days to reply, and then that decision will be made either 11 or 13 weeks after. That's it.
Thank you very much.
That's it. Is there any reply to that?
We are going to give a reply now before the other speakers come in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
anyway.
very much. Before we do have any other speakers, I'm just going to bring Neil in. I've got a few comments that I want to add before we do have any other speakers.
It's for information as much as anything. There is an update report. It's not unusual to do an update report because we get information on many applications right up until the last minute. So there is a recommendation on deferring this for a couple of reasons. We have a barrister's letter that's been sent to us today in respect of the highway information that we've had, and also referring to some of the flood issues and what the appellants, not appellants, perhaps that's Freudian, what the applicants think is the right way to deal with things. All parties are expected to deal with each other reasonably, and the reason for the recommendation of deferral is so that we as a council get some time to look at this new information and to respond and bring something back in more detail next time. The consultation is a standard letter, sir, that we send out because we've had responses on flooding, etc., that we wanted to give the statutory consultees at some time to deal with. So it won't be 13 weeks, they get 21 days, and it's as a response to other information that's come through with that. So I hope that explains the background. Unfortunately, there's no cut-off date for planning. People will get things in late and expect the councils to deal with them late. In this case, I think the information is weighty enough really for us to say, let's take a step back, consider it, and recommend that members defer this and bring an updated report back next time. But that explains the update, Chairman, because I know there's some confusion perhaps on the process.
Thank you. I am going to bring those speakers in, but I just want to give you the option. It is most likely going to get deferred once it's voted upon. If you do still wish to speak, you guys are still more than welcome to. I will call your names out if you do wish to speak. If not, when it comes to committee again, you can speak again. Deborah Ashler.
I've nothing further to add. Everything's been mentioned there.
That's fine. You'll still be able to speak if it does come.
Yeah.
Again. Thank you. James Dixon.
Mr. Chairman, my problem is security and safety. I mean, as a former HGV driver of an articulated lorry, length of about 50 foot, now extended to about 70 foot, accessing the concrete factory. With children playing, there were two 90-degree bends going to that factory, and it will create serious difficulties and danger for the children to play. Not only that, as a householder on Greycroft Close, virtually at the top, our property is approximately 30 foot 35 foot above the proposed building. So we're going to be looking down into the properties, possibly the bedrooms, bathrooms or whatever, of the residents. And of course the noise has already been mentioned. I don't know what's been said before because I haven't heard a blooming word about it, because I'm pretty deaf. But that's my thing, is safety and security.
Thank you. Gordon Bell.
I'll speak for my husband if I may,
Oh,
because
yes. She's got something to say.
I've got something to say. I'm one of the residents on Fairbank, and I have a very simple question. What is the proposed development supposed to be like? Is this going to be a development that's sold to the public? Is it about to be rented? Or is it going to be sold to a conglomerate like Lloyds Bank or some of these big pension funds who are currently buying up properties and on a swathe and they're renting them out? We have no idea what the proposals are for this development. Can someone tell me?
Thank you.
It is a private development and it will be privately, were it to be approved, and I'm not saying it will be, but the intention is it's a private developer who will build and, if approved, sell the units like a Redrow or any other developer would do.
Does that answer your question? Yeah. Thank you. Gordon Bell. Oh, that was the one, sorry. Bryony Hartley.
Thank you. I'm just coming to back on what other people say, but the figures that were released in West Croydon's area meeting last year was that there are currently 153 unoccupied residential properties within the West Croydon area. The last figures in the 2021 census, 11,000 people. People wanted to know, are there going to be any disabled bungalows added to any of these, any affordable housing for families of the local area, given that the area in question, so there's Gisborne Road School, as somebody's already mentioned, the safety of the road, and the children up and down, there's Pelican crossing, there's zebra crossing there. What impact is that going to have on the community currently within Fernbank, with all the extra traffic, the condition of the roads, which have already been reported numerous times? It's not built for HGVs. It's going to end up like North Valley in Cowell, essentially. You know, the flooding's already been mentioned, which has already happened due to problems with previous developers within the area. What impact long-term is this going to have on the residents already in Fernbank that needs to be brought to attention?
Thank you. Angela Robinson. That's fine, thank you very much. Over to councillors.
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
Sorry, I indicated earlier on.
Sorry. You're going to come in there again before we do the councillors in all.
Chair, just on one point, Brianna, was it on the affordable housing? There are policies in the current local plan, and we're due to hear on the inspector on the new local plan hopefully shortly. There's a 5% requirement for affordable housing, and that's been through the last local plan inquiry. That's 4 units effectively.
Chairman, first of all, I should declare that I have previously considered this application as a member of the local area committee and at Bonalswick Town Council, but I come here with an open mind and listen to all the arguments for and against, and perhaps Councillor Hartley needs to declare the same as well.
So, yeah, I declare the same interest.
I was keen to get that in because I didn't want to leave us at risk of contributing the rules.
It's not the fire alarm going off, is it?
No, sorry. Look, I was sat here. I told people earlier on if I hear the wrong noise, we'll be out. That was the right noise. Sorry. Mr. Chairman, I am very familiar with this site. I'm going to do a Councillor Hartley here. In the 1960s, when I was nobbut a lad, we had the hen pens which stretched from Fernbank Mill. Well, there was the horse field, but the stretch effectively from Fernbank Mill right over to where Priory Way has been built and Robinson Court has been built in the past. And in the 1970s, I worked at Lontex, and I can indeed confirm what was said by, I think it was Barry, about the concrete yard, D&H Concrete, because that was set up behind Fernbank Mill in 1971 and subsequently expanded up the hillside there. And I think that an issue that has been mentioned by residents, but I would like to emphasise, is the amount of noise and dust that comes from that concrete plant. They have the batching plant, so they manufacture the concrete, which is noisy in itself, and then they've got a vibrating table which settles all the concrete into the products. So that is very noisy. Unfortunately, due to a bit of confusion, I arrived at the site, visit late, I waved at you as you were leaving, and I wasn't able to observe at the same time as other councillors, but I know full well just how noisy that plant is. And it should be said that D&H Concrete, it's a very seasonal business, because they make stuff that is used in gardens, and it's more summer than winter. So during the summer they do manufacture up to 14 hours a day, and that is a noise that those who were there this afternoon and heard it in operation, you'll appreciate is quite significant. If you look at the noise assessment in the documentations, I think there is a question as to the period in which that noise assessment was carried out, and if you check the dates, it may be that you find that it was actually over a weekend, and so they weren't operating, and it doesn't really give a full picture of what those noise levels are. I do know that a former prospective developer for that site looked at it, looked at the noise levels, the measurements that they did, and walked away because they didn't think it was an acceptable location. So the batching plant, the vibrating table, is a big issue. You can actually hear the vibrating table as far away as Victory Park if the wind's in that direction. That's quite a significant way away. So you can imagine how noisy it would be for people living cheek by jowl. Now, I note that the developers are saying, well, we'll put in an acoustic fence to contain the noise. Well, I'm not quite sure how tall you can build an acoustic fence. It was mentioned about Great Clough Close being 35 feet higher than the development site. Well, at the other end, the batching plant, the concrete plant, is higher still. So you'd have to have an acoustic barrier that went, I don't know, 10, 15 metres into the air in order to be effective. I just don't think it's feasible, really. And given that it's incumbent among the developers to ensure that the residential amenity is protected, I just question whether it's a viable option for them to do so. Fernbank Avenue and the access. Effectively, Fernbank Avenue is a cul-de-sac. There is one road that comes off and goes over the hill to the next road down, which is Richmond Road, and that is very narrow. You can drive it, but it's very difficult. and as has been said by various speakers, it is effectively single track. This afternoon, when councillors visited with the official site visit, that was typically how it is. You know, nobody parked it up deliberately. And I know, as someone who, not often, but regularly visits that area, part of my councillor duties, you can maybe park if you're lucky, but often not, you're really struggling. And I think the point that was made in terms of Rosemount Avenue, Melville Avenue and Oakfield Avenue, these are all long tourists at one side, shorter tourists at the other side, none of which have a front street. They're unadopted street, they have gardens, there is a pedestrian route up, and that's it. There's a back street, which you can imagine the typical back street width, so it's not, the residents don't have anywhere to go. Hence, the level of parking on Fernbank Avenue itself. I was very disappointed with the County Council and their comments, which effectively said, well, we recognise there's a problem, but we don't think you can do anything with it. So they're accepting there's an issue, but what do you do? And as was said, when you pull round off Gisborne Road onto Fernbank Avenue, you can see whether there's somebody coming, you know, like several hundred yards away, and you're stuck on that junction. Now, it's a 90-degree junction, visibility is not good, so potentially somebody else could come round and there's a great risk there. Whilst I'm at the junction, and mention has been made about the HGVs going to and fro the concrete works, the County Council is saying, well, put a build out on. And if you put that build out on, there are comments on the portal, if you put that build out on, the wagons can't turn and go to the right. They would have to, everything would be forced to go to the left. So the one thing that the County Council is saying, which they think would improve the junction, would actually make it worse. And I think that's another factor. I've covered that point. Loss of employment land, Mr. Chairman. I worked there in the 1970s. There were many businesses in there, and the land got planning approval to build a series of commercial units. It was named the Research and Development Site for Hope Technology, who own the land, and presumably the developers have an option to buy it. Hope Technology, at one point, they were talking about building a mini velodrome there, but obviously that's gone off the boil. I mean, it would be lovely to have a velodrome there. In terms of the accepted permission, the one that was approved maybe 12 to 18 months ago, I'm looking at Neil, that was the best commercial application that I have ever seen. Sensitively designed, wonderful landscaping, respecting nature, using the water course, and it was great. Unfortunately, obviously, housing trumps that employment use. But we are going to have to find employment land for the next 20, 30 years. We're okay at the moment with the current local plan, but we will be embarking on another local plan, and then there'll be another local plan after that. So somewhere along the line, we will have to find employment land, and will the loss of Fernbank Mill site mean that there's pressure on greenfields elsewhere? I fully accept that Fernbank Mill is a brownfield site, and in general that is to be welcomed, but in particular I think we've got to take all these factors into consideration. Lots of people, and indeed the area committee, the town council, mentioned the problems with infrastructure, as was mentioned by residents as well. The doctors, the inadequate, very inadequate health facilities. There's no mention about actually providing additional facilities for people to use locally in Barnoldswick, in our neighbourhood. And I want to come back to the point that was made about flooding, both by Barry and by others. And I went back to the 1960s, I'm going back to 1932 now. And in 1932, we had the Barlick flood. And the Barlick flood was a devastating flood that ripped through Barnoldswick. The watercourse that goes under this land contributed to that flooding. Now, the culvert, which was described as 3 metres deep, I actually, because of the sinkhole that appeared on it, I looked at it maybe 9 months ago or something like that, and I thought it was about 4 metres down. As has been said, it's a stone flag culvert, and being a bit of a lay expert on culverts and watercourses, those are at great risk of collapse because the flags break and they fall in like that. So if you get an obstruction in that culvert and the water backs up and you get a flooding event, then there is going to be water following what they call exceedance channels, finding its way overland, perhaps through people's houses, or perhaps through people's property, and that blockage or that collapse could lead to those terrible consequences. The ideal would be to open that culvert up, to dig it out, to make it into an open watercourse, and then you get rid of that risk. But the developers aren't proposing to do that. So, Mr. Chairman, I understand what the recommendation is here now. If we were making a decision tonight, I would be proposing that on the basis of the information that we have at this point in time, that we should refuse it. I accept that to refuse it at this point without exploring the issues that have been raised, the barrister checking the legal position out, all that sort of stuff would put the council at great risk in terms of being deemed to be unreasonable. So I'm not going to propose that we reject it. I will propose that we do defer it, check all these issues out. I hope the lead local flood authority will recognise the things that the developer isn't proposing to do stuff about, and I hope that and probably expect that they will maintain their objection, because the flood risk is a big thing, and it affects not only the people living downstream, but the people who would live on this site in the future should it be developed. The last thing, I can't just see who it was, but one speaker referred to the existing dwellings on Great Croft Close, looking into the bedroom windows of the proposed development, and I think the residential amenity of any new resident, should this be built, needs to be taken into account as well. But I will just move that we do indeed defer this for further reports, and we'll have the debate at the next meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe-Grace.
I will second that deferral. I'm the chairman of the Home Neighbourhood Plan, and obviously looked at a brownfield site, because we're all inculcated to look for brownfield sites for development. So on the initial outline, before I visited, I thought, excellent, it's a brownfield site, we're welcoming it. But then as I read the report and stood on the site, listened to the noise, considered the lead local flood authority, felt more than a little miffed that the developer has just said no to the LCC demands, which are usually just accepted. I thought there were many, many concerns here, and I spoke to Councillor Bell in the downpour and said, we need to defer this. So there were just many concerns here. We need to get to the bottom of all of these things. And Councillor Hartley and the other Cone councillors know I'm a sort of person who believes in children playing out and love the idea of children playing in the street. And obviously that idea of the HGVs going through, powering through, would sort of negate that as well. And I totally take Councillor Whip's view as well, that actually, yes, we do need employment land. So there's a panoply of concern on what seems to be, initially a brownfield site in a dip, not visible from long-range views, but actually there was too many complexities for us to take it any further. I will just sort of make a couple of extra little comments to help the audience in a sense, in that we're always frustrated. People always mention about doctors and schools and dentists and all of those things. And we can't really take that into consideration. It's not a planning thing. And I know that sounds counterintuitive. It's just it has to be provided. We can't take it into consideration. However frustrating that might be, it's just one of those things. And then a lot of us are very frustrated as well, in a very regular basis, by LCC highways. But the truth of the matter is, the tests for severe impact of highways are ridiculously high. They are so high. It is very, very hard to prove severe highway impacts if you're talking about volume of traffic. That's just another one of those things that we deal with. But generally, there are just too many things here. We need to get to the bottom of so many of them.
Thank you. Councillor? Yep.
I'm always pleased when we have an audience and there are people that who want to speak, because Neil doesn't like me saying this, but I quite like NIMBYs. I quite like it when people say not in my backyard, so long as you've got a reason, and I think that we've heard quite a number of reasons this evening. I think it's really good when people care about where they live and put some sort of argument forward about what's going to happen where they choose to live. And that's an interesting thing, where you choose to live. Because when we visited the site, I always look on Google Maps. I get my papers, look on Google Maps and see where it is, look at the lay of the land, where are the nearest neighbours, what's going on in that town. I know about it roughly, but not specifically. So today when we visited and stood on the site in the pouring rain, it was interesting to see just how noisy the concrete factory was. I was shocked, and I thought, you know what, if they built these houses and they were beautiful, still I don't think I'd want to live there next to that factory. It was so noisy. So, my colleagues have already said, Councillor Wick sort of cantered through the report and went through lots of different things, and I pretty much agree with it. There are lots of holes in this, and there are lots of reports and things missing, but lots of bits of information we need to know to make a good, proper decision. So I'm happy to support the referral. But another thing about that came up from one of the speakers who took, I think that the term that was used was a tone of blackmail. It felt blackmail. I'm not going to make any comment on that, but I think it's interesting that when we look at the application, there's a certain tone about it. LCC have flagged that there is obviously some sort of issue around the access from Gisborne Road, and you agree, you could say, yeah, of course, and they propose something. And then when you look at the response from the applicant, they say our report says that they don't believe that it's necessary. Well, I don't believe that it came made to be fact, but it does. You can't just say that you don't believe something. You've got to take the evidence and you've got to do something about it. So you can't just reject things out of hand. So I think that we need to get a lot more information here before we make a decision. So yeah, I'm more than happy to support my colleagues with it further.
Thank you, Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to echo everything that you all said tonight. I've approached this tonight with an open mind, because I've no paperwork in front of me, so I'm going to listen to everything that everybody's had to say. To me, for the first time, it's got to hear your point of view for the first time. And again, when I first looked at the initial planning, and I thought, well, where's the play areas? You know, I know that Councillor Sarah Golden-Price is championing play areas throughout Pendle, especially in Corn.
I'm championing playing on the street.
That's a lot of it, playing on the streets. And I know that Councillor Shutcliffe loves different housings, and you know, he says, why can't we all be different? And just basically, yeah, anybody who lived, who was born and bred in Barlickers like myself, and like they know the noise coming from DH concrete, which there's why it's set back and why why before other people haven't built houses near to it. You know, we've got the generations of people before that, you know, not building on that area back to the 1930s, and they say it's a once in 100-year event, this big flood. Well, we're coming up to it, so this big flood could well happen, and it'd be good to get all the information, and again to echo what they said up there about, you know, there's a tone in their application that's threatening, knowing they can take it as high as they want. So I was going to second Councillor Whip's proposal, but we're bringing to it, so I'm quite happy to support everything that's been said.
Thank you, Councillor Yasser.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I was going to keep my powder dry because this is going to be coming back to another meeting, but there was one or two points which I think I would just using and look at the report. Our good friends in the Highways Department again, writing that having heard what members of the public have said, what councillors have said, and then having viewed, I wasn't at the site visit, but Councillor Faraz had the Google Maps images of the site. And having looked at that site and having heard Councillor Whip and other colleagues and the residents, what the highway says, and Councillor Coburn-Price is of course right that it's a high burden, and I've never seen a report from LCC on this committee where LCC have said they've got high-risk concerns. And this is in relation to applications I'm familiar with in my ward, where there are concerns. I'm concerned, the residents are concerned, everyone's concerned, apart from LCC. Why? Because they look at this, sometimes they look at it from a Google Maps point of view, they look at it, I don't know what they look at, but they look at anything sometimes, I'm not sure. It really baffles me on some of the things that come out with, because I think one of the speakers was saying that there's enough traffic for where two cars going past each other, but if there's a car parked on either side, and you've got trucks here, honestly, it's really baffling. That's one thing. The other point was, on the way here, because this meeting normally takes place in Nelson, the chair very kindly offered me a list from Nelson Town Hall, which I graciously accepted. And he attended the site visit, and he was mentioning something about the noise, which I think Councillor Coburn-Price mentioned and somebody else mentioned as well. And that was the key thing he mentioned, that he could hear this noise from the site, and even he mentioned during, and he didn't express an opinion, I've got to say, as to which way we're going to vote, but he did suggest that it was very noisy and how on earth what people going to live there. And again, that's been conveyed here by members and by members of the public. So reluctantly, I think Councillor Whip's motion to defer is probably the right one, given the issues we need to iron out. But I think these are important issues which we will need to grapple with at the next meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Any other speakers? So we'll move to the vote, which is to defer. Moved by Councillor Whip and second by Councillor Sarah Coburn-Price. All those for? So that's been deferred. Thank you very much. If you would like to stay, you're more than welcome to. We have got 2 more applications. So if you would like to leave, you obviously can as well. Okay.
So I think we do that one then.
Yeah.
Because there isn't a speaker, is there, for the other one?
Yeah, there isn't. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Just before Councillor Whip goes back to we're going to be doing the Barrowford application next because we haven't got the agent here for that one. So, yeah, that's the last one. Thank you. Right, so we're going to move on to the next application, which is 25/0602/PIP, permission in principle, erection of 4 dwelling at 34 Pasture Lane, Barrowford. Could we please have the agent here for some, please?
Good evening, Chairman, Councillors. Committee are aware key considerations in the PIP Stage 1 application. And that only a location, land use and amount can be considered. If the application is successful, then a separate PIP 2 technical details will be submitted. To reinforce the officer's report for approval, I would just like to reiterate the following. Location. The key policy consideration is policy LIB1, sites close to the settlement boundary which are sustainable and make a positive contribution to the housing land supply will be supported. The site is just 40 metres from the settlement boundary. Policy LIB1 is engaged. Within short walking distance of local shops and services, therefore considered to be in a sustainable location. Land use. Housing has previously been acceptable in principle for the site, and the council currently doesn't have a 5-year housing land supply. The development would make a positive contribution to housing choice in the sustainable area. In terms of amount of the land required is only marginally more than the previous approved application. All other considerations including design, highways, trees, ecology and biodiversity, drainage and heritage will be detailed as part of a Stage 2 application, and the applicant is confident that all these matters can be positively addressed. The Council is clear in their report on the assessment and recommendation for approval of the development. The Council should therefore support the professional assessment and approve the application.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Councillor Whip.
Chairman, thank you very much. I don't think any of us like the planning in principle one because far too much is left to further on in the process, and it is what it says, planning in principle. And I just wanted to clarify with Mr. Watson in terms of whether the principle of development was established by the previous application relating to this area, and if so, I just don't think we've got a leg to stand on. So, Mr. Chairman, if I could ask through you.
Chairman, unless policy changing, obviously we've got a local plan we're still waiting to hear on. The approval of the last house did set a principle, as did, I've got to say, other decisions made by predecessors to this committee on land slightly further away in that location. There will be a slightly different view of the world, I think, once provided that the local plan gets adopted.
Thank you.
At this moment in time, the principle is pretty straightforward, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Sarah Coburn-Price.
I'm also highly irritated by permission in principle. Sneaky, really. But we have to address it, and address it we must. I can see all kinds of potential access problems in terms of a miserable little track that has to go through that hedge to reach the 4 dwellings. All of these things we can't consider. As Councillor Whip clarified with Mr. Watson, we basically have already given permission in principle, albeit then for one house, but it's really the same for four. So we might, none of us like the way it's been presented, but we actually don't have any choice. So therefore I propose approval, reluctant approval.
Councillor Barton-Stone.
Thank you, Chair. So, before we assume that this is sustainable, I think we need to question more closely why we think that this is sustainable. The previous decision was rejected, and I should say I was part of Barrowford and Western Parishes Committee, so I do declare that interest, although I have remained very open-minded, because this is a judgmental decision at heart. The so-called principle of sustainability was established rather pretentiously for one property on this site. That was rejected at Area Committee, and it was approved here at Development Management in 2023. So what we have for us now is for additional properties. Now, these additional properties will undoubtedly have an impact on visual amenity and the setting and impact on the open countryside. However, back to sustainability. This decision in principle is only acceptable if we conclude that it is sustainable. Now, and we talked about Lancashire County Council highways, one of the rare times they've actually noted anything, they point out in their report, the site is not well supported for sustainable travel. Note, LCC agreeing that this is not a sustainable site in terms of travel. And I think that's quite telling. Can I go on to the principle of sustainability further? One, in the officer's report, there is a reference to it's sustainable because it's 40 metres from the settlement boundary, 320 metres from Booth, 780 metres from St Thomas's Senior Primary School. Well, there's no spaces at St Thomas's Senior Primary School. It's irrelevant. Saying it's near a school that you can't get your children into is not a relevant consideration. It's not a relevant argument. So, again, if we were to approve this, it would fundamentally change the footprint of the site. And I would also point out that, again, in terms of the sustainability and impact on the open countryside, this approval, if the boundaries go about up to 150 metres from the settlement boundary, they go considerably beyond the original application for one property on which the previous decision was taken. I should also point out that I believe an application in the field above was recently refused as being too far from the settlement boundary. So we cannot just assume that the first application was acceptable on sustainability and this one therefore is. It's clearly pushing at the extreme limits of what is a sustainable location. LCC say that. We know that the other application recently rejected also suggests that it is very much on the edge. It's a judgment call. I also note it's being rushed before us precisely to try and get it in before the new local plan is adopted. So I have to say that my judgment is that what was considered sustainable for one property cannot automatically be considered sustainable for 4 additional properties. And so, Chair, I would move that we refuse on the basis that it is not sustainable.
Thank you, Councillor Yasser.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, can I just ask a question? I'm not sure if this is the same side very close by. I think Councillor mentioned before about an application they signed in 23. I remember there was, Councillor Stone, remember there was an application which Councillor Arnold came to on the DN. It was in Barrowford. It wasn't obviously this one, Neil. That was a planning in principle as well, which we approved. How far was that from here? What was that in relation to?
So it goes back in further than that. There was a decision which was supported by, I'm not point scoring here, by Barrowford Parish Council 400 metres outside the settlement, and the argument I've just had, a debate actually was put by those officers to say 400 metres is too far out, and the argument that came back was no, that is sustainable. So we are in a precedent. I'm afraid those past decisions have to be had regard to. One was 400, one is on this site. You're going to really struggle as a council to say what is different now than what it was before. And we're only allowed to look at location, land use, which is fine, amount of development, which isn't unacceptable there. And as an authority proved, not only this site, we didn't object in terms of sustainable location for the one that was above, which was to do with heritage setting. And there's one further away that the council said that was in a sustainable location, all under the same policy framework. So, Chairman, you hung by your own petard in some ways, because that boat has been well and truly sailed. But those decisions were made, and at the time, the advice given was, you will set a precedent if you approve this, and I was firmly told it's sustainable, and that's a further 400 metres away.
And it was that bad decision years ago that affected the 2023 decision for the single house.
But can I ask this question again in a different way? Accept as a precedent, but that was a precedent in this particular site for one. Could we not argue that this is four, that there is a significant difference in terms of the planning that was allowed was for one, now it's four? Is that not?
No, it's the relationship to the settlement and the distances which are irrelevant. Whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 houses, it's really not something that's going to have. And you can't look at that anyway, because it's only in principle. The truth is, if you refuse this based on it not being an adequate location, you will go for down on costs because of previous decisions. And sorry to say, it was, we warned at the time that those decisions will come back and will have an impact, and we were quite clearly told the council's view is that these are sustainable locations.
Councillor, yes, sir. Is that sorry? Councillor Whip?
Can I second the move to approve? I respect what Councillor Stone has said, and I understand that he feels strongly about this. But the principle was established when the previous application was approved, and if it was sustainable then it doesn't matter whether it's 1 or 4, it's sustainable, isn't it? The only argument that in the case of principle could be impact on the landscape, but I don't think that would cut much ice in this case, so I second the proposal to approve.
Thank you, Councillor Barrows.
Sorry, Neil, just a quick one. As you go up past all the lane itself, I'm trying to find the location. You go past Pasture House Farm, and there's a little,
that's it, where it is.
There's a little lane or anywhere.
That's it, the
Is that
little
the actual
lane.
lane?
Yeah.
Right, okay. That's what I want to know. So it's just literally on the left hand side of it. Right. Okay.
Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Chair. So I do note that it does specifically say that it is not a sustainable travel location in the LCC highways consulted response. So it seems to me that we can't ignore the fact that it says it's not sustainable. That is surely evidence that it isn't sustainable. The other question I had for Neil, if I could, is you talked about a precedent 400 metres there. I thought there were no precedents in planning at all. It cannot be that every application is considered on its own merits and situation. So when you talked about 400 metres, that is not a relevant consideration, is it?
It's only the European Court that doesn't work on precedent. The British system, court system and planning system does work on precedents. You do look at each case on the merits and look at the individual impacts, etc. with that, but that's in a framework of other decisions that have been made.
Any other speakers? Do we have a second for the refusal?
Approval?
No, because the Martin's don't.
Oh, sorry.
So I just want to second.
I'll second you.
So we'll take the vote on the refusal, which was moved by Councillor Martin Stone and seconded by Councillor Yvonne Tennant. All those for the refusal? And fine. All those against the refusal? So we'll take the vote on the approval, which was moved by Councillor Sarah Coburn-Pratt and Councillor David Wick. All those for the approval? All those against? That's been approved. Thank you very much. Final application is 25/0480/HHO. Erection of a single-storey rear extension at 35 Taylor Street, Briarfield. We don't have no speakers or councillors. Councillor Wick.
Chairman, Councillor Andy Bell, did you do the site visit? Yes, you did. I would like to invite Councillor Andy Bell, given that he's rocked up at the meeting, did the site visit. I think we should hear his views on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was a very interesting site visit we saw today. We saw the plan, the outline that we were looking for. There, in near vicinity, there is a very similar extension that's been built. Now, I've just given notes to Councillor Bailey on there, Hartley. If I remember rightly, the length is it 5.9?
5.2.
So it comes outside the permitted extension. Now, because it's a standalone one today, I was looking at it, I'm thinking, yeah, as a standalone, it'd be great. But when we looked at the existing one that's further down, and somebody's built another one, you get a severe funneling effect. Tunneling effect, which we've had before. Now, I agree that there should be an extension, but I don't agree with the size of it. The reason being is because if they do the size that they're going to do one, build an extension, they'll get refused because of that tunneling effect. If it was within the permitted building or building size, wouldn't have any objections, but I personally would actually recommend that it be refused due to the fact that if there was any other buildings that go up in the area, it's going to have an adverse effect on the neighbour.
Thank you, Councillor Wick.
Thank you, Chairman. This is 35 Taylor Street, Briarfield. We had it previously. and we asked if they would come with amended plans. Am I on the right one here? Yeah?
No.
No, we have been there before.
This is I think it's the right area committee maybe. That's what it.
No. Sorry, am I on the wrong application?
No, it's right.
You just said that on the report.
35 Taylor Street, Ryefield.
Chair, can I say, I think from memory, might come to the area committee, and the area committee might ask, I think it was deferred for the applicant to put in further plans. That never came, and then it was decided the last area committee. I think that's what it was.
Okay. So the area committee asked for amended plans.
I can't remember if there, whether it's the applicant, I'm not sure councillor remembers, it's either the applicant or the area committee asked for further plans. So further discussions, I think. Further discussions, I think was.
Yeah, so it says in the report the application was deferred from the September meeting for amended plans. None have been submitted. So clearly the area committee wasn't happy with the original application, but despite the fact that there aren't any amended plans come in, is now recommending that it be approved. And I think, Chairman, without rehearsing all the arguments that we have with these matters at every committee, that we do need to be consistent. And if the area committee originally felt, well, they should amend the plans, I think we should stick with what the area committee originally said. And if there are, I was going to propose actually that we invited amended plans, and I'm more than happy to stick with that. But if they were asked for in September and we still haven't got them in November, then it's perhaps an indication that they don't want to provide any amended plans. So I would propose that we refuse it. They can always submit some attacks.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to second that. I think that, as you said, there's been adequate opportunities to submit new plans. When you look at the plans and you look at the properties, it's very simple. It's completely transparent in terms of the scale of what's proposed. But what struck me is that when you look at the land of the terrace, there's actually, they've all got these little sort of jut outs, bay window kind of thing, to maximise the lighting to the property. So why bother having those and then building a great big extension that completely overbears both your own and your next door neighbours, which completely denotes the point of having that bay window. So it's nonsensical. And one thing that I note on the proposed ground floor plan is that it's got toilets, which is accessible from outside. Now, my grandparents used to have an outside toilet way back when I was a child. And went out into the yard when it was snowing or whatever. It was not fun. And so I can't imagine that.
It's a shower.
It's also a shower, yeah. So I definitely would not want to shower out there. And even with heating, we wouldn't want to be nipping out into the yard to want to spend a penny. And so I can only imagine that then we'd have a little corrugated plastic roof over there, and it would just be a creep of developments that I wouldn't really want. So based on the reason set out in the report, I'm a bit overbearing and I to support the refusal.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, can I just comment on this very briefly? I think in terms of, from memory, I think you're right, it is unusual to have the way it has. I think it might be because of this applicant or someone living in that house that needs it for easy access and disability issues. I think that might be what that is, but I suppose that's not a funny consideration, technically speaking. But just question, Chair, this is a pitched roof. There's an overbearing feature in the report. Obviously, it suggests that if it's 4 meters, it would be allowed, but if it's more than 4 meters, it's obviously recommended for refusal. There's a pitched roof. Had it been a flat roof, would that make any difference? Because it's only a single story, isn't it? So there's obviously a wall there on one side. Would that make a difference if it was a flat roof rather than a pitched roof?
It would help.
Okay.
I can't, because I haven't got a design, I can't say whether it would
Because I think that might have been one of the considerations that the committee had. Either the applicant, I can't remember now, I'm just on my word, but the applicant or the committee may have suggested that that was one of the reasons to defer. Do you know from, not really the spot, do you know from memory if you had conversations with the architect, or if there was a discussion that at least started and the applicant said, I'm not moving it from what I've put the amendment plans in for, or?
I know I contacted the architect by email and didn't get any response, and that's hence the comments in the report, so they just didn't get back to us.
Okay. Yeah, because Chair, obviously I wasn't at the site visit, but it's an area I'm familiar with. As Councillor Sutcliffe has said, and I think Councillor Marshall mentioned, that this is a Taylor Street, that part of Taylor Street, there's a number of extensions. In fact, the report itself acknowledges that there are a number of other extensions. In fact, number 30, is it 33 that has one? Yes, 33 that has one already, and it's 37 on which this has an unacceptable overbearing feature. Chair, I'm not sure if this is open, well perhaps it is, and I suggested that we allow the applicant to file amended plans, because if it's that pitched roof, given it's a single story extension, and that might alleviate the overbearing feature or the overbearing impact that this application has, can I suggest that we go for the deferral to the next DM meeting?
That's everything.
Any other speakers?
Sorry. No. Chair, I've just been asked a question. Is it free for a resubmission? Used to be, but it's not now. You pay.
When did that, sorry, that's curiosity, when did that change?
Not free. Not free resubmission of 2 years ago.
Oh, really? All right, those. So it's a full application?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, on that basis, can I propose that we defer this application?
Chair, I'm content to withdraw my original proposal. I did think that they'd get a free go, but in the circumstances, give them a month if they come on with amended plans. If they prove satisfactory, fine. If they don't come with amended plans, I would go back to refusing this, because I don't think it's acceptable, and I don't think it's acceptable to make the neighbours' lives a misery by allowing something that shouldn't be approved.
The amendment, sorry, the original motion withdrawn, so that's the motion, I think, now, isn't it? Yeah.
To defer. So,
that's withdrawn.
Yours, Councillor, is deferring. So, we're going to take the vote on the deferring date, which was moved by Councillor Yasser, second by Councillor Jack. All those for deferring? All those against? That has been deferred. Thank you very much.